What if we could feel more grounded in who we are while also understanding the world our kids are growing up in? Today, my guest expert is a pediatric resident physician, rising social media star, and best-selling novelist who shares insights on storytelling, identity, perfectionism, and the realities children and adolescents are navigating today. By the end of this episode, you'll learn how embracing multiple identities can reduce burnout and increase fulfillment. See how storytelling helps bridge gaps in communication across generations, gain perspective on the pressures, isolation, and emotional shifts impacting today's youth. So let's dive in. Welcome to Success Reimagined. I am Dr. Amna Shabbir, your host on this journey to thrive at the intersection of ambition and wellness. In every episode, I'll help you challenge outdated definitions of success, discover practical tools and strategies for growth without compromising your well-being. I am so glad you've joined me. Let's reimagine what's possible together. Tyler, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Please introduce yourself to my audience, and I am specifically curious in that introduction in you sharing how you ended up being both a pediatrician in residency and also a best-selling novelist.
Well, yeah, hyping myself up there. My name is Tyler Beauchamp. I am a second year pediatric resident. And as you said, I am a children's and young adult author. I started writing long before I wanted to go into medicine. I actually was a patient for a long time growing up. And the process of being a patient, I used to write in waiting rooms. And that's kind of like it was my escapism. So medicine was the last thing on my mind. I just had that negative outlook. But then later I fell in love with that side of the curtain. And I have been kind of trying to find this way of bringing them together since. And in med school, I was really fortunate enough my first story to come out, Freeze Frame, and was very, very fortunate with the kind of the success in the audience that it found. And it kind of sparked this new journey that I've been on since then. And so today a resident who continues to write fiction, and also an op-ed writer, but just really trying to do this combination of writing and pediatrics.
And today we're going to get into a lot of creativity. And, one of the things that drew me to explore this conversation further with you was this real identity that is present in so many different directions. And a lot of times and doing it well and doing it while you're sharing it online and in a public way, which is so incredible as a learning process for many other individuals in the audience. Those that are high achievers but feel like they have to be boxed into a certain identity and they're not able to explore those multiple facets of creativity, of science. So I'm really excited to dig deeper into that. You mentioned Freeze Frame, and tell us about it. Like, tell us all the things, what it is about, and what was the message you were hoping that young people would get from that?
Yeah. I think it's really funny when that came out. I think, first of all, no one really in my life other than like my mom knew I was a writer. And then that came out. So it was kind of a shell shock for people around me. And I think a lot of people assumed because I was in medicine that it was going to be very like nonfiction, or I think some people thought it was even like a textbook. And then they're reading it, and it is the furthest thing from medicine. It is very much a young adult psych thriller coming of age story. So it very much is different than that. But no, it's about this high school boy who is using art to overcome this previous trauma. And he kind of embodies his trauma through these hallucination type episodes of films, jumping in and out of reality to kind of uncover what has happened to him. And so, yeah, nothing to do with medicine per se, but I was really inspired by, at the time I was writing it was in the middle of the pandemic, and kind of witnessing the isolation I was seeing across kids and teens. And, at a time that they're just, designed to be social and to experience life together, that's ripped away. And so many of them are saying the same thing of how alone they are and how their experiences are so unique, but not to belittle them, but as unfortunate as it is, it was a universal experience that they just couldn't understand that the person next to them in the waiting room was feeling as well, and the person next to them. And in medicine, it's not like we can just open up all the doors and then break HIPAA and have everybody just like commune together. And writing, writing, we connect to each other and we connect to those we don't know. So that's kind of why I wrote that. And the hope was to try to connect those that were feeling a bit isolated at a time that was pretty isolating.
I have so many thoughts surrounding what you just shared, especially from now a unique perspective of a very concerned mother, concerned about
Mm,
overall the way youth mental health is progressing. In, I mean, the numbers are in front
sure.
of us, how our youth is really struggling in so many different domains. And you talk about isolation, loneliness, and that really beautiful way to use fiction to bring attention to that. My audience members, a lot of them are like me, right? We're all high achievers, and many of us are parents or community members. You could be aunts, uncles, neighbors around young children. As a pediatrician, with this lens, now you're creative as well. You are looking at things in a very unique way where you're connecting multiple worlds. What do you wish like somebody like me knew, or a parent or a caregiver knew when it comes to the struggle and the isolation that you're mentioning? Some things maybe what your patients have said, or as also as a young adult, your personal experiences.
Oh man, where to even begin with that? I think one of the biggest things that would love parents to know from reading my book, and then also just from being in the clinic or in the hospital, is one, to give themselves a pat on the back and a deep breath that this is not easy. I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to even go into describing how difficult it is to be a parent, but I witness parenting every day and the peaks and valleys of it. And this is beyond a difficult time to be a parent, both with what's going on in uh, pediatric medicine, the world as a whole, what kids are faced with. So part of it is, I wish parents could pat themselves on the back and take a deep breath and say, like, this is an exceptionally difficult time to be doing the job that they're doing. But with that, also for them to, I think it's easy to say like, "Oh, it was a lot easier. It was a lot harder back then," or, it was, 30 years you didn't have it the way I did. And I think that's like a generational thing that, my parents' generation said to me and their parents' generation said to them. I think we're coming across the first time truly where I look at what children are going through, and I do not believe that I, in my generation, had it harder than what they do. Like, I think we're actually having a flip. And at least when I was growing up, my, generation is sort of told, "Hey, you have it easy. You have no idea what it was like, 30 years ago. But at the same time, you have to fix all of our problems. But also these problems can't be fixed." So no wonder like my generation became like nihilistic and depressed and all of these wonderful things that like you just ingrain from the self-defeating aspect of the mentality we're taught. But now I think that having that generation above them, what the kids are going through is just expanded upon that. But the rate at what they're exposed to, the things that, they shouldn't have to be exposed to, it's just so I would love to say the word precocious, but I say unfortunately kids just have to grow up so damn fast. And I would implore parents to take a step back and be like, "This is not the way that it needs to be," and to just try to meet their children where they're at rather than trying to pull their children to what the experiences they had growing up.
I'm taking a deep breath and receiving that piece of advice, like you said. It is really hard, and it is
Yeah.
true. I feel like that's one of the most unhelpful statements that we ever hear. Like, it was harder for us. Like, great, now we're just like
Yeah, what do you want me to
shattering
do with
bridges.
that?
Great.
And
Okay.
also that statement, by the way, it turns a feeling of like, you only are ever saying that statement when you are meeting a child or someone younger than you at a time where they are vulnerable, where they are in need of advice, where they are going through something. And that statement, all it does is turn the feelings of you being a mentor or a guide into making it about yourself and your experiences and totally depriving them of the comfort and support that they need. It's just to say, "Hey, I know it's really bad for you. I had it worse." It totally flips it. And now the child is placed in the position of subconsciously, am I supposed to be there for you now? I was coming to you for A, but now this is kind of about like your thing. I've always it's such an unhealthy, unproductive statement that just gets tossed generation after generation.
That was a really good reflection. Absolutely. I think that when a younger adult or a child or somebody in that position is coming to you for help as the more wise person in that relationship, the one with holding the power dynamic, now that you have to, as a child, sense that I don't want you to be upset. I want you to be okay. And yeah, anytime you say that statement, it definitely, I think it leads to alienation. It is the most unhelpful, unproductive statement. In the middle, like as I'm interviewing so many high achievers across age groups, across professions, I get to also experience, this conversation. And interestingly, not even just on the podcast, I've had a lot of these conversations in some consulting meetings recently
Mm.
about what's wrong with Gen Z as they are entering the workforce, like literally as the question, and nothing is wrong with Gen Z. I just don't want anyone who is Gen Z listening to this thinking like I'm telling you to tune out. But I get asked this question, like, and what I'm getting it, my understanding, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, Tyler, is a lot of the work related trauma that was handed to us, and we were told to be honored if we got that role, the title, the shiny object, and we should just be honored and take on all those roles and jobs without any boundaries, without understanding of what that is. Gen Z is just not ascribing to that narrative anymore. They want to know more. They want to advocate for themselves. And other people in older generations are perceiving it as, oh, I hate to use this word, laziness or whatever we
Yeah.
want to call it. Break this down. I know we ran on a little bit of a tangent, but as a younger adult, a non-parent, and a pediatrician, you are at a very unique intersection of multiple identities to answer this.
Wow. You know, I think that I'll touch on this. I think it was 2 years ago where, for the first time ever, the number one most cited or like desired job of graduating high school seniors was no longer one of the big three, like lawyer, doctor, engineer. Like, it wasn't one of those. For the first time ever, it was entrepreneurs, and then second was, I think, specifically YouTuber. And I think some people took that as like, "Oh, all right, we're done. We lost. Like, all right, the world is, what do we come to? Everyone wants to be a YouTuber." And I think that's the wrong takeaway from it. To take from that, I think that what the Gen Z and Gen Alpha have sort of, I think it's a byproduct. If you're told for so long, like, the world is horrible and the world is unfixable, yet you have to fix these problems, yet you're not equipped to it because you don't have the experiences we did. And you just keep that narrative of, we're going to eventually send you off into this world that you were unprepared for, yet if you don't fix it, we're going to blame you. I think that the lack of guidance and the lack of support, a lot of these people have just kind of said, well, fine, I will find my own way. If people aren't going to support me, I will have to support myself. And in an age of technology and social media and like that, one of the easiest and most efficient ways to support yourself is to make yourself your own business. And so I think that um, I don't think it's a vanity thing, or it's I'm sure for some it probably is, but I don't think overall it's a vanity thing or a laziness thing. I think it's that it's okay, well, I don't have the support that I need, and so I will support myself, and that's why I will go on my own way. And unfortunately for that, that is both very positive and empowering, but it's also can be isolating. And when you get into your head like, it's me against the world, if you think that for so long, it eventually does become that way, which is my fear that it needs to be it needs to be a little bit of a 50-50 there. Like, there's nothing bad with being an entrepreneur, but maybe have some people by your side along the way.
Thank you for that behind the scenes, candid look at this situation. Before we shift gears, I would love for you to give maybe a helpful statement that would be more optimistic, not nihilistic, that potentially we could use. I mean, definitely I could use. I am raising what currently fall into Gen Alpha, but to strong girls. And so I know that I always want to add that optimism. Like, so what
Yeah,
can we say or believe or share um, to the younger generation that would add in more optimism?
absolutely. I would say the positive side of kids having to grow up fast and be a little bit more precocious is that they've become so brilliant so quickly, and they've become so creative so quickly, and they've become so eager to grow and expand faster than before. I mean, I see every day, I see kids that are, 8, 9 years old doing things that I wouldn't imagine doing when I was a teenager, but being confident about it. As far as like, learning new hobbies or, self-teaching XYZ. And I just like, I look at the parents and the parents are just like bamboozled by where do they learn this stuff? And it's like, oh, they learned it on YouTube. It was like, so sometimes they're not always just like watching, you know, a silly video of, they're learning, they're growing, they're sponges soaking up everything around them. But now, because they're soaking up in an age where access to information is so instantaneous, the positive side of this is like with a little bit of direction and love and guidance, you can turn that sponge into something so uniquely wonderful that was impossible to do when I was a kid or when you were a kid. So when I see that, like, I'm extremely hopeful for the future because I think that, yeah, we're putting a lot of pressure on kids to fix problems that we don't have solutions for. But I think also they're at this age and time, this perfect cross point of like technology and their development where I think they will be able to come up with those answers and they're eager to find them. That's incredibly hopeful.
I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to hold on to that, and I definitely can see it. I've had that feeling like, "Wow, how do they know this?"
Yeah.
And leaning into that and creating more constructive environments with that, absolutely. Now, shifting gears a little bit
Mhm.
and focusing on your like multiple identities that you have. So let me list just a few. You wrote that novel we talked about. You were interning at ABC in New York a couple of weeks ago as we're recording this. You're surviving medical education. You're a pediatrics resident right now at the amazing UNC, Chapel Hill. And you are also running a very successful social media presence. Many of the videos that you share are hilarious. We're going to link all your links in the show notes because definitely
Thanks.
check you out. Most people struggle to do one thing well. And a lot of times, like I look back at medical education, medical training, and I was quite quiet, like not having the audacity to definitely be on social media. But this is what we need. So take us behind the scenes and specifically in your brain. How do you do all of this?
Wow, that's very, very kind of you. I definitely see where the question comes from, and I really appreciate it. I like to if you don't mind, I kinda wanna flip it. I get
Mhm.
asked this question a lot, and I think it should be asked of, like, how are you able to do these things, but kind of like how can we afford not to anymore? And for me, it's always been a simple answer. I just do the things that I love. I love medicine. I love creativity and all those kind of things that are like the whether it's the book writing or the comedy and all that stuff. To me, it's all just the same bucket and it's a different expression of that bucket, you know. And to be fair, I'm not like writing a book today and doing a comedy skit and doing like, I like pick and choose my battles as the days go. But like it gives me so much energy, and I know there was a time in my life when I purposefully cut that out because I was told that it was, not needed or a distraction or, unprofessional even potentially. This is, before residency, and I just was, depressed. My grades were slipping. I felt brain fog, and I just didn't feel whole, and the reason I didn't feel whole was because I wasn't. And I think that for whatever reason, we all have passions that are placed in our hearts. Some people have a million, some people have one. It doesn't really matter, but for whatever reason, it's there. And I think when you deprive yourself of those passions, life's just, duller and tasteless. But when you lean into them, everything feels brighter. And I honestly, like when I started bringing those back into my life, when I was taking them out, my, like, efficiency in studying went up, I was retaining better, and so when you put time into the things that give you energy, it all works out and as far as, you're making the life that makes you happy. So, I mean, there's, like, plenty of things, to be fair, that I love doing that I don't do too much anymore, like, I, was a musician growing up, I love singing, and I try to sing every now and then, but it's also that battle of, you know, time is so limited and so precious, and it's like if I do get the time off, as happy as, singing makes me, I know that writing makes me so much happier. So there is a little bit still of you can't do everything in the world in a given day. You have to pick your battles, but you don't have to, that doesn't mean you have to cut out all your passion. In fact, it's leaning into those passions in medicine right now that our patients desperately need of us. Um, I always say the one thing in medicine that most patients can't relate to is medicine. Yet we spend our entire lives, burdened and robotically trained to only think, live, and breathe that. And then for whatever reason, we're shocked when we go into a patient room and we have 15 seconds to get them to trust us and believe that we're there for them and divulge the most personal details of their life. And we've we don't know how to do it because we don't know how to meet them where they are because we stripped all that stuff away. So I would argue that for everybody out there who has some kind of passion, like it's harnessing that's going to make your patients, you know, believe in you and trust you more than anything else.
You use the word humanity and dehumanizing there in that reflection and sharing, taking us behind the scenes. And I love how you flip the question. And this is exactly why I feel we need to talk to younger clinicians. We need to talk to younger high achievers because they are doing some things really well and we can all learn from it. So I believe that I sort of killed parts of myself when I entered medical education. I used to write poetry. I used to write fiction. I used to be in plays. I used to write plays. I used to act. I used to get on stage. I used to do a lot of public speaking, all of that. And then I enter medical school and there's silence. I
Mhm.
stopped writing. I stopped speaking. A lot of people who don't know me from before are sometimes surprised that now I'm speaking, now I'm writing. Well, those were just parts of me. And I absolutely killed them. I also remember sitting and listening to a lecture on how you should present yourself online. And it's not that you and I are presenting ourselves in inappropriate ways online right now, which is also a loose word in and of itself.
Yeah.
But, there was this element of like, that's just not what you do as a physician in training. And so the parts of me that were already leaning towards rigidity and perfectionism and all of that, I just armored myself up and I was just like a mask, like literal mask, and still struggling to just let it go. It's
Mm.
happening very slowly, but I think that this process of rehumanizing is so important and so wholesome. And so what if we never let that thing happen in the middle?
Well, yeah, and it's so funny because to even get on this road, like to get the, you know, holier than thou med school acceptance that people strive all their life for. Yeah, you've got to cure cancer for one. You've got to, you know, get a 7.0, all these things. But on top of all of the impossible, improbable, statistics, you also have to show how unique you are from the person next to you. And it's just like clockwork every year where I see these people getting ready to go to med school and like they do all these incredibly unique things before they start. And then the second it hits, it's just they're told, okay, now never do any of that crap ever again. Like that's great. You proved that you could do it. Now but, like, don't ever do it again ever for the rest of your life. I'm like, "Well, then why why is it just for a number? Is it just for a stat sheet? Is it just to, save face as an institution?" Like, no, you the reason that was originally there is to show, like, yes, what doctors have to be able to balance is insane, and it does take a certain type of personality to devote your life to this, but that kind of personality is doing it for a specific reason, and that reason is, you know, inspired by and fueled by passion. And what you're doing is showing like how that passion seeps into everything else they do, but you're telling them to cut out the little, or prune out the edges that help build that fire. And now you're surprised where 2 years into med school or a year into residency, that smile is gone. Burnout is on a rise. Physicians are leaving medicine every single day at a rate, uh, you know, astronomical compared to it was 5, 10 years ago. Put 1 and 2 together.
Yeah. Because all of that, it's right. It is such a funny way that you're bringing back really like memories from a long, long time ago when I was making all my resume for medical school nice and pretty, and I was doing all these things, and it makes me realize the very real performative element of impression management, which is what we do when we are entering medicine. And then, of course, like, dare you then diversify your existence and add that humanity and put yourself out there as a wholesome human who has the ability to exist in a multiple different ways. Like, dare you do that? Absolutely. I love that you brought that up. I have a question now, Tyler, because I know I talked about performative and appearances, impression management, touched on some of these things. I'm curious to know, as a creative and as a physician, have you ever struggled with perfectionism, and particularly as you explore these multiple identities?
Oh yeah, all the time. It's probably one of my least favorite things about myself that I'm constantly trying to get rid of. Like, see it the most in my writing. I think early on, I'm definitely my worst critic when it comes to anything that I write creatively, and even like coming up with the comedy shorts and stuff like that too. But more the writing, and I mean, there'll be times where I'll just like write an entire chapter and then delete all of it. And I had like a test reader or something reading, like, "Oh, that was great." I was like, "It wasn't though," and it's probably overkill, but like I try to remind myself that, that, great is the or perfect is the enemy of good enough, that if I there's no such thing as perfection, and, my dad, he's a creative too, and he always taught me that, how do you know when you're working on a creative project or a creative process, how do you know when you're done with something? How do you know when a book is done or when a poem is done or when a song is done? You don't. You just choose a moment to walk away from it because it's never done. But if you don't walk away from it, you can never make the next thing. And I try to remind myself of that, is that like yes, you have to remind yourself that there's no such thing as being perfect. And hopefully, if you're doing this process right, you should be mortally embarrassed by something you made 5 years ago, because that shows that you've gotten better. Like, you never wanna look back and be like, "Oh, I peaked then. Everything since then has been worse." Like, no, like, that's the best part of this. There's things from my first book that I just, like, cringe reading, but at the time, I remember writing, like, "That's the best thing I've ever done in my life." You know? So, yes, I struggle with that all the time, still working on it every day.
I love that reflection that you share from your father. Like, you just choose to walk away and then, putting yourself out in the world. I will say that, and it's the irony of mass proportions, because I'm writing my book on perfectionism. And I gave my TEDx talk on perfectionism, and I felt like it was not perfect enough. And then I just told myself that I'm going to insert that sentence in the actual TEDx talk. Like, the
Yeah.
talk about perfectionism doesn't seem perfect enough. And then I completely feel that way. There's something so vulnerable about creativity also. And I think that just makes me very uncomfortable that all of a sudden I have to step away, take off that mask, and actually put this out into the world. And then it depends on how it is received by the audience, right? And that can be to me, I feel like it's incredibly vulnerable. And so I'm just telling myself right now, and holding myself accountable on this journey. Like, I announced that I'm writing a book before the book was done, when I was investigating about the book. And from my own personal version, like, that is a lot to actually say something out loud that is completely not done. And so that was me openly challenging my perfectionism. And I continue to do that. And I'm telling myself that the book will come out when I will have forgotten about the actual outcome and I would have taken complete joy in just the process.
And I'm so glad you said that, because I definitely get asked a lot about like, or people that want to write a book or they want advice on going into writing. And I think a large part of why like 99% of people who have that interest or desire fail, or it never, comes to fruition, is because they like the idea of having a book, or that like it's like a bucket list thing rather than what it actually means. And I always tell them that when you write anything, whether it's like a poem to a book or when you create something, the second you create it, it's no longer yours. The second you are done, it is no longer yours. It exists to the world, it exists to the audience, and how it lives, dies, is loved, is hated, or it changes, the interpretation, all of that, it's up to them now. It is only yours while you are making it. And so if you're living the creative process of like, like trying to get these accolades or like thinking about that end goal, it's not going to fuel you through those times because it's not fun all the time. Like it's a lot of work and it is a job, but just because it's not enjoyable sometimes doesn't mean it's not enjoyable for the whole time as a whole. Like it's such a lovely process. And if you don't love it, if you don't love the journey of it, then you shouldn't do it. But like you said, let it be yours for as long as you can let it, and then let it be the world's.
Oh, so beautiful. Another thing is really like remove your ego from this process, right? Don't turn this into another box checking, add to my resume, soul dead thing. A lot of those things were necessary to get you to where you went, but a lot of those things were not necessary. Like we didn't even talk about the hundreds and thousands of publications that we have to work towards and all the things that we have to get to the journey to places, right? But this does not have to be like that. And many of those
No.
things actually gave you true joy. I'm not questioning that, but a lot of that was also very performative. And
Hmm.
I think this really, I had to reckon with it when I started on the TEDx process. Like, there was a part of me that had this ego that I am going to give a TEDx talk. And as the process went on, I realized how I witnessed my ego dissolve completely. And it was all about the idea. And I think that was the biggest learning experience for me. Otherwise, yeah, I could have maybe published like 4 or 5 books by now. I'm in true honesty for the amount of writing that I'm doing. But it's not about that. It's actually taking joy and trying to be intentional in what I'm trying to put out into the world.
I love that.
Yeah. So I would love for you to share advice for anyone in the audience who is a high achiever, being pulled in multiple directions, also struggling with perfectionism and thinking that they have to stay buttoned up and they're not sure, they can't put all this stuff out there. They also cannot have the professional education that they're desiring. What is some pieces of advice that you would give to them?
Yeah, I think the first would be, um, you need to know your why. I think that you're if you going into anything without a compass is gonna be non-fruitful. We all anyone in med school or in medicine as a whole is certainly and has an element of type A in them. Think about the people in college or high school that like, "I wanna be a doctor," and then, like, as the pre-med classes start going strong and you start seeing people drop, and I think it becomes less about like the academic rigor, but it's more of this marathon that's exhausting. And you realize that you're only one lap in of this, multi decade process. But I think the people that not only stick it out, but enjoy sticking out and are, fulfilled by it are these people who had this very strong why from the start. And so that should be shared in everything else that you do is like when you're going about, if for people who are listening, if you really are interested or desire to write a book or to, be a musician on top of what you're doing, like why is it? Like, why do you love that thing? And why does it need to be something that needs to have a product with it? Like there's a difference between writing because you enjoy it and writing because you have a goal of writing books. Like, I'm a musician and I sing and I play guitar. I have no interest or desire in making an album, but I still love doing it. And so, I try to tell that to people as well as like just because you see someone that is writing and has these things that are like on their CV or is music and these things are on their CV doesn't mean you have to be to engage in them. So know your why before. Not everything has to be like some great end product, but for the things that do, I would go back to, you know, the reminding yourself that once it is a product, it's no longer yours, and how and really think about how that will make you feel. If that's something that, kind of disheartens you or that, the knowing that once you put something out there that hey, if you create anything, somebody's probably not gonna like it. I can certainly attest. I like framed my very first hate mail. I thought it was the coolest thing ever, but like that's just it just goes to show because you can't please everybody. So if it's about that, then maybe that's not something that you would like to be a part of your journey in that process. Maybe it's something that you want it to be more internal, like journaling or poetry for yourself. But if you truly love the process of it and you find that it is giving you energy to things in life and you find yourself more awake and on fire as you're doing other things, and knowing that once you create something, just because it's someone else's, it just means that it's making room for you to make the next thing. If that gets you so excited, then you need to go for it.
Love that piece of advice. And this book, it's coming to my mind right now, The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. It was recommended to me by another amazing friend who's a generational strategist, Greg Singleton. He quoted this specific sentence from the book, which has stayed with me. Impatience is an argument with reality. And that was like
Mm.
so powerful when you're thinking about creativity. So pairing this amazing advice that you give along with this book for anybody who's listening in the audience, as we wrap up for today, Tyler, this has been such an incredible conversation. We touched on many important topics. How can my audience learn more about you, support your work, buy that book?
Well, just thanks for having me on here. It's been a blast. We definitely need to do this again soon. I could talk about all this for hours, as I'm sure you can. But yeah, you can find any of my writing on my website. That's tyler-beauchamp.com. I'm on Instagram at Tyler Beauchamp MD. That will have my writing on there, and plus the Silly Goose comedy. And then my book, you can find it anywhere, like Barnes and Noble, Amazon, my website. Yeah, those would all be. And then stay tuned. Hopefully, have some exciting writing updates coming. Can't quite talk about them yet, but stay tuned. Hopefully, we'll see them soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
You might believe you don't have the time or energy to focus on yourself, but this is exactly the right time to get serious about your well-being. You don't have to do it all alone. I'm here to help. If you enjoyed this video and are ready to take the next step, head over to dramnashabbir.com, where you'll find free resources you can access right away. The website link is below. Let's get started on your path to thriving.